Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're standing at the threshold of a building long forgotten. Its facade is broken, overtaken by ivy and rust, a skeleton of what once was vibrant and alive. The air is heavy with dust, thick enough to taste. You expect silence, the stillness of a place abandoned for decades. But the silence never comes. At first, it is subtle, a faint groan, almost like the building itself sighing under the weight of years. Then, a sharp creak, as though someone had just stepped onto the stairwell above you. You freeze, breath caught in your throat, listening. Nothing follows. The sound doesn't repeat, and yet your heart is racing because you know what you heard. In the hollow belly of a forgotten structure, silence is never what it seems. Why do these places sound so unnatural? Perhaps it's because sound thrives where life has been stripped away. A single drip of water becomes deafening in a cavern of rot. The flutter of a bird's wings echoes like thunder in a corridor that hasn't felt human footsteps in 50 years. Even the shift of air through shattered glass sounds deliberate, almost purposeful. And the mind plays its tricks. A hinge squeals, and it becomes a scream. A loose shutter rattles, and it becomes laughter. A hollow pipe breathes, and it becomes a whisper. Rationality tells us these are just physics, just echoes, wind, metal, and wood. But fear whispers something else. Fear tells us that these noises are memories replaying themselves, the voices of the past refusing to fade away. Every abandoned place is a graveyard of stories. The paint-peeling walls, the broken floors, the collapsed ceilings, they are remnants of people, of lives, of moments now gone. And it feels, doesn't it, as if those memories are trapped inside, bleeding out through the cracks in the form of sound. A hospital corridor where the faint shuffle of steps is said to echo, even though no one has walked there for decades. A school gymnasium where the metallic clang of a basketball hoop rings out at night, though the hoop itself has long since fallen. A church whose organ, untouched for generations, moans with the wind as if still playing hymns for an invisible congregation. The unsettling truth is this: abandoned places never stopped speaking. We simply stopped listening. Think of the last time you stepped somewhere empty. Maybe an old house about to be demolished. Maybe a basement you never liked being in. Do you remember how your senses sharpened? How every sound, no matter how faint, cut through you like a blade? You tell yourself it's just the building settling, just wood shrinking, just pipes breathing. But then there's that moment when the sound doesn't fit, when you hear a laugh too human, a sigh too deliberate, a shuffle too rhythmic to dismiss. That's when logic begins to falter. That's when you realize fear doesn't need proof. It only needs a sound. This is the journey we are about to take, into the forgotten chambers where whispers still roam, into prisons where walls hum with sorrow, into factories where rusted beams echo like distant cries, into churches, schools, memorials, and homes, each with its own sinister symphony. We will explore not only the eerie sounds themselves, but the reasons behind them. Sometimes science explains it all, acoustics, air currents, the strange way that sound bends and echoes through decay. Other times, the answers are not so clear, so listen closely as we walk together through the darkened halls of the abandoned. Because once you recognize that silence is never truly silent, you begin to hear things everywhere. And the more you listen, the more you wonder, are these echoes simply the voice of nature, or something else, something reaching out from the past? So let me ask you this. What if these echoes are not accidents? What if they are not random creaks or groans, but imprints? Ghosts not of flesh, but of sound. What if the whispers you hear are not tricks of your imagination, but fragments of lives still looping in the darkness? The door before us groans as it swings open. The stale air rushes out, carrying with it the scent of dust and forgotten things. Beyond lies a hallway where shadows stretch unnaturally long. And somewhere in the dark, a sound waits for us. Take a deep breath. Step carefully. The echoes are already listening. When you step into an abandoned place, your body knows something is wrong before your mind admits it. The silence is thick, unnatural. Your ears strain, desperate to catch the faintest sign of danger. And that is when it happens. The first sound, a tap, a shuffle, a sigh that seems to slip from nowhere. Here's the truth. Our brains are wired to fear these sounds. Psychologists call it pareidolia, the instinct to assign meaning to random patterns. We see faces in shadows. We hear voices in the wind. In abandoned buildings, the emptiness amplifies every noise, tricking us into believing we're not alone. Yet sometimes, the line between trick and truth is blurred. Because there are sounds that defy reason, sounds that should not exist at all. Consider the Hindenburg disaster of 1937, when flames consumed the airship in a storm of chaos and despair. Decades later, the memorial stands as a place of quiet reflection. But visitors report something strange. On windless nights, a faint chorus drifts across the site. Some claim it sounds like crying. Others, like voices calling desperately for help. Skeptics argue it's nothing more than the creaking of the old structure or the shifting of metal remnants buried deep beneath the earth. Yet those who have stood there swear the sounds are more than noise. They carry emotion. They feel heavy, drenched in sorrow. And here lies the chilling question. Can tragedy leave behind an echo that never fades? Can the final screams of the past imprint themselves on the present? Far away in Philadelphia stands the Eastern State Penitentiary, a prison abandoned since the 1970s. Its crumbling corridors stretch like arteries, leading nowhere. Its cells are cold, narrow, and damp, a labyrinth designed for despair. But the strangest thing about Eastern State is not what you see, it's what you hear. Visitors often describe it as singing. Not a melody you can place, but a low, singing, droning hum that rises and falls as though the walls themselves are breathing. Some say it is the wind slipping through cracks in the stone. Others believe it is the reverberation of countless prayers, cries, and confessions etched into the prison over more than a century of suffering. A guard once described the experience. It's like the air vibrates with voices. You stand still, and the sound surrounds you. You know it's not music, but it feels like something is trying to speak. Even researchers who brought advanced recording equipment struggled to explain the phenomena. The sounds exist. They can be measured, documented, but their source remains elusive. Of all the noises in abandoned places, footsteps are the most unsettling. They are precise, rhythmic, deliberate. The unmistakable sound of someone or something moving. Imagine this. You're exploring a derelict hospital at night. The hallways are long, lined with broken doors. You walk slowly, your own footsteps echoing, hollow and sharp. Then, from behind you, another set begins. Not overlapping yours, but following, matching, pausing when you pause, continuing when you continue. Your pulse quickens. You turn, shining your light down the corridor. Nothing, just peeling paint and shadows, yet the sound remains. How do we explain this? Some argue it's simply acoustics, your own footsteps bouncing back in unpredictable ways. But not all encounters can be dismissed. Too many witnesses have described the same thing: footsteps pacing behind them, circling around them, or even moving across upper floors when no one is there. What if these are not echoes of the living, but imprints of those who once walked the halls? Residual movements replaying themselves like a broken record in time? Skeptics insist all of this can be explained. The creaks, the whispers, the phantom footsteps, mere tricks of acoustics and psychology. Our minds crave patterns, and in silence, we create them ourselves. That is the rational view. But rationality doesn't explain why groups of people hear the same sounds at once. Rationality doesn't explain recordings where voices appear that no one remembers speaking. Rationality doesn't explain why we feel watched when the echo of footsteps trails us through the dark. There is something in these places that defies the clean comfort of logic, something that lives between sound and silence. So ask yourself this: if sound can carry across time, if tragedy and memory can imprint themselves into the very walls of a building, then perhaps we are never truly alone in forgotten places. Perhaps every creak, every sigh, every phantom footstep is not just an illusion, but a message, a warning. And maybe, just maybe, the echoes are trying to tell us that some things were never meant to be forgotten. Every building has a voice. It might not speak in words, but its materials shape the way sound moves and lingers. Wood groans as it ages, stretching and shrinking with every shift of temperature. Metal clangs, carrying echoes like a bell, sharp and piercing even in the smallest space. Concrete hums, a low vibration that seeps into the bones of those who listen. In abandoned structures, these voices grow louder. Why? Because the usual distractions are gone. There is no chatter, no traffic, no televisions humming in the background. All that remains is the raw conversation between decay and silence. A conversation you can only hear if you stand very still. Sometimes, the walls click and snap as though cracking their knuckles after years of holding themselves upright. Sometimes, a hollow corridor seems to amplify even the faintest sigh until it feels like a presence breathing just behind your neck. The architecture itself becomes the instrument, and you are trapped inside its song. Then there is the wind, the eternal musician of forgotten spaces. It slips through shattered windows, weaving melodies through broken glass. It howls across long hallways, stretching a simple draft into a mournful wail. In stairwells, the wind spirals, creating sounds like whispers rising from the depths. Stand in a broken church, and the wind may transform the collapsed roof into an organ of air, each gap singing its own note. Stand in a factory with rusted beams, and you may hear a drone like 1,000 voices humming together. The building does not need electricity to speak. The storm outside provides its own orchestra. And in those moments when the wind grows too human, when its voice bends into something you recognize but cannot place, fear roots itself in your chest. Because you are no longer sure whether you are listening to weather or to something else using the weather to reach you. Rain is another composer of abandonment. Drip by drip, it becomes a clock, marking time in places where time was supposed to have stopped. In empty rooms, every drop echoes, as though the ceiling itself is weeping. On rusted metal, the rain becomes percussion, a steady tapping that grows into an ominous rhythm. There are explorers who claim that during heavy storms, some abandoned buildings seem alive with sound, entire symphonies created by leaking roofs, dripping pipes, and puddles trembling under each drop. One man described it as the building playing itself, each broken surface an instrument in a song of collapse. But not all rhythms are comforting. Some are irregular, uneven, too deliberate. A dripping that speeds up when you move closer. A tapping that seems to answer your own steps. That is when the sound transforms from natural to sinister. That is when you begin to wonder if something unseen is drumming just for you. Nature does not wait long to reclaim forgotten spaces. Birds nest in rafters, their wings slapping in the dark. Rats scurry through hollow walls, their claws scratching patterns too precise to ignore. Bats shriek in the upper chambers, their high-pitched calls ricocheting until they sound like laughter. At first, these noises can be explained away as the living taking back what humans abandoned. But animals add their own unease. A sudden flutter above your head feels like something watching from the shadows. A sharp squeal in the distance becomes a scream when your mind is already on edge. And sometimes you hear movements too heavy to belong to birds, too deliberate to be rats. Heavy thuds, slow pacing, footsteps, but larger than any animal you expect to find. And then the silence returns, and you are left wondering if it was ever there at all. The strangest part of these soundscapes is not the noise. It is the absence of it. In cities, silence does not exist. There is always a car in the distance, a faint hum of power lines, a murmur of life. But in abandoned places, silence is total, suffocating. And in that silence, your brain begins to invent. The creak of your own shoes becomes deafening. The sound of your breath seems intrusive. The quiet pushes down on you until even the faintest disturbance feels overwhelming. It is here, in the oppressive stillness, that the smallest sound transforms into something terrifying. A single pebble falling, becomes a threat. A faint breeze becomes a whisper. A drop of water becomes a warning. So what is it we are really hearing in these places? Physics? Nature? Our own minds unraveling under pressure? Or are we tapping into something deeper? A resonance left behind by the lives that once filled these walls. Each abandoned structure is like an orchestra warming up, its players invisible, its music unpredictable. Creaking timbers, dripping ceilings, sighing windows, scratching animals, groaning floors. They all join together, weaving a soundscape equal parts beautiful and horrifying. The longer you listen, the more it feels intentional, as if the building is not falling apart, but performing, as if the decay itself is aware. And when that thought takes root, every sound becomes suspect. Every whisper, every echo, every groan of wood might not be random at all, but part of a message, a song of ruin composed not for beauty, but for fear. So tell me, when you hear it, will you stay and listen, or will you run, chased not by footsteps, but by the music of the forgotten? Every whisper, every footstep, every sigh of air inside an abandoned place leaves us asking the same question. Where did that come from? Our instincts push us toward the paranormal, ghosts, spirits, residual hauntings. But often the truth is both more ordinary and more unsettling. Because when you strip away the mystery, you discover that the composers of these eerie soundscapes are always there, hidden in plain sight. Yet there is something unnerving about realizing that the noises we fear most are not always supernatural. Sometimes they are simply the forgotten mechanics of a dying building. Sometimes they're physics playing tricks. And sometimes they're us, our minds creating monsters out of echoes. Think about it. A rusted water pipe releases a hiss of escaping air. To the ear, in a darkened hall, it becomes a whisper, almost like a voice hissing a secret. A loose shutter bangs against the wall, but in the cavern of silence, it becomes a phantom knocking at the door. Wood expands, contracts, and cracks under changing temperatures, sounding eerily like footsteps pacing back and forth. A nest of birds fluttering in the rafters mimics the shuffle of unseen figures. Even rats chewing through the remains of furniture create a scraping sound that can easily be mistaken for someone dragging something heavy. The ordinary, once stripped of context, becomes sinister. And that is why abandoned places grip us so tightly, because the line between natural and unnatural is always blurred. In recent years, explorers and researchers have brought advanced equipment into forgotten structures. Sensitive microphones, frequency analyzers, and infrared cameras, all designed to separate truth from imagination. What they find is fascinating. Some noises, once thought to be ghostly voices, are revealed as wind resonating through narrow pipes. Footsteps often turn out to be the delayed echo of the listener's own movements bouncing back from distant chambers. Even whispers, when slowed down or amplified, become nothing more than overlapping drafts of air. But sometimes, the recordings reveal the opposite. Sometimes, microphones capture sounds the human ear never noticed at all. Low-frequency rumbles that seem to come from nowhere. High-pitched tones that pulse rhythmically as though on a pattern. And then there are the moments when a clear voice appears, words spoken in the silence without any source. One team reported capturing what sounded like a woman humming in an abandoned theater. Another caught a deep male voice repeating the same word again and again inside an empty school. The most unnerving part? These sounds didn't match any natural explanation. They had tone, cadence, and intent. But what if the mind is the true composer? The power of suggestion is extraordinary. Tell someone that a place is haunted, and suddenly, every sound they hear becomes suspicious. Tell them a ghost is known to whisper, and suddenly, the faint draft through a crack becomes a chilling murmur. Our brains are hardwired for survival. In the dark, in silence, they sharpen to detect any sign of threat. But the human mind does not tolerate uncertainty. It fills in the blanks. That's why many who enter abandoned places alone report hearing voices. Not because the voices are real, but because their minds create them out of fear, out of expectation, out of need. Still, this explanation does not erase the thousands of reports from people who hear the same sounds in the same locations, across generations. Coincidence or something more? Imagine the building as an instrument, its every component a string or key. The wind is the bow that draws across it. Rain is the drummer. Shifting beams are the bass, deep and resonant. The hollow spaces between walls are chambers of resonance, amplifying and bending sound until it no longer resembles its origin. And maybe, just maybe, there are other players too, not of this world, not bound by physics. Something unseen that uses the natural orchestra as its stage, weaving its own notes between the cracks of reality. Because here's the unnerving possibility. What if the mundane and the paranormal do not compete, but merge? What if the ghosts we imagine do not create their own sounds, but borrow the instruments of decay to speak? What if every creak, every sigh, every faint hum is both natural and supernatural, a collaboration between ruin and memory? So where does that leave us? We can debunk some sounds, we can explain many, but not all. The unseen composers remain, whether they are our own fears or something much older hiding behind them. Perhaps the true terror is not in the possibility of ghosts, but in the certainty that abandoned places will always make us hear things we cannot fully understand. The sounds will come, whether you believe in them or not. The echoes will find you, even if you try to explain them away. And once you have heard them, you can never unhear them. They stay with you, lingering long after you've left the crumbling walls behind. So tell me, when the next unexplained sound slips into your ear, will you dismiss it as air and wood? Or will you wonder who or what was standing in the dark, using the building itself to speak to you? Close your eyes and imagine standing in the center of a forgotten asylum. The windows are shattered. The roof leaks. The floors buckle beneath layers of dust. You expect sound, wind, rain, maybe the shuffle of animals. But instead, there is nothing. True silence. It presses against your ears like a physical weight, a void so deep it feels unnatural. And in that suffocating absence, you begin to hear things that aren't there. Your heartbeat becomes thunder. The sound of your own breathing seems too loud, too intrusive, as if it doesn't belong in this place. The silence itself starts to whisper, not with sound, but with suggestion. This is why silence in abandoned places is so terrifying. Because silence is never empty. Silence amplifies everything it touches. People often think that the scariest part of an abandoned place is the sudden noise, the footsteps, the whisper, the bang in the distance. But sometimes, the scariest part is when there is no noise at all. Silence becomes a scream you cannot ignore. It makes you hyper-aware of every detail. The creak of your shoe sounds like an explosion. The flick of your flashlight seems to echo, even though light has no sound. You swallow, and it is as if the walls themselves are listening. Explorers often report that silence in these locations feels alive, as if it is not absence, but presence. Yet strangely, people are drawn to this silence. We seek it out. Abandoned churches, empty hospitals, desolate schools, they call to us. Perhaps it is because deep down, we crave to hear what silence reveals. Without the clutter of modern noise, you begin to notice details you would otherwise ignore. The faint shifting of dust, the slow collapse of beams, the almost imperceptible vibration of air. Each one feels like a secret being whispered only to you. But the longer you listen, the more those secrets feel dangerous. Because silence doesn't just reveal the present, it hints at the past. The things that happen there, the people who once filled the halls, the tragedies that may have unfolded. Think of silence as a blank canvas. Onto it, your mind paints whatever it fears most. For some, it is the image of footsteps approaching in the dark. For others, it is the sensation of a voice just about to speak. Silence gives you no answers, so you supply your own, and those answers are often terrifying. This is why silence is described as deafening. It fills your head with possibility. It magnifies uncertainty until even the smallest sound becomes unbearable. A single pebble falling in that silence feels like a warning. A faint gust of wind feels like a sigh against your ear. And once you've heard it, you cannot escape the thought, what if the silence isn't empty at all? What if it is hiding something? And yet, there is something beautiful about it. The silence of abandoned places is unlike any other. It is pure, untouched by the hum of machines or the chatter of life. It is silence that belongs only to ruins, only to the forgotten. It is silence that carries stories. Standing there, you feel as though you are part of something ancient, something greater than yourself. The silence stretches endlessly, connecting you to everyone who has ever stood in that place. Felt the same stillness and wondered the same questions. It is haunting, it is terrifying, and it is breathtaking. So perhaps the allure is not in the sound at all, but in the silence that surrounds it. The silence that magnifies fear, that tricks the mind, that draws us deeper into the mystery of forgotten spaces. And maybe that's why people return. They walk into empty hospitals, silent factories, crumbling schools, not just to hear what makes noise, but to hear the silence itself, to stand in that suffocating void and confront the unease it creates. Now, ask yourself, when you hear silence, do you truly hear nothing? Or are you hearing everything? The whispers of the past, the breath of decay, the echo of things you cannot see. The silence is waiting, and the next time you step into a forgotten place, it will be listening. We've walked together through creaks and groans, whispers and footsteps, hums and sighs. We've listened to wind weaving through broken windows, rain tapping like skeletal fingers across rusted beams, and silence pressing in like a weight. And now, as we step back from these forgotten places, one truth lingers. Abandoned buildings are never truly empty. They are witnesses. Silent, yes, but never voiceless. Every sound we've heard is a story. Some are stories science can explain. Air currents, echoes, wildlife reclaiming space. Others are more elusive. Strange harmonies, phantom footsteps, voices without sources. Together, they weave a tapestry of memory, fear, and wonder. Why are we drawn to these sounds, even when they terrify us? Perhaps it's because they connect us to something primal. Our ancestors relied on sound for survival. Every twig snap in the dark might have meant predator or prey. That instinct remains, urging us to listen closely, to react to the faintest disturbance. But maybe there is something else. Maybe we're drawn to these echoes because they remind us of mortality, of impermanence. Buildings crumble, lives fade, but sound lingers. The echoes become a bridge between past and present, reminding us that nothing is ever fully gone. There is beauty in fear, a terrible magnetic beauty. Standing in the silence of a ruined asylum, you are terrified, but you are also alive, more than ever. Your senses sharpen, your awareness expands, your heartbeat thunders. Fear makes you listen, and when you hear something that shouldn't exist, a laugh in an empty hallway, a sigh in a forgotten stairwell, you realize fear has given you a gift. It has made you hear the invisible. Is it real? Is it imagined? Does it matter? The experience itself is what lingers. Imagine leaving one of these places. You step outside into daylight, into the comfort of sound and life. The building is behind you now, just a shape against the horizon. You should feel relief, and yet you still hear it. A faint echo that doesn't belong. A sound following you, soft but insistent, as if the building is reluctant to let you go. Explorers often say the same thing. The sounds stay with you. Even days later, they hear faint knocks in their homes, soft whispers when falling asleep, footsteps pacing just beyond closed doors. It's as if once you have listened, truly listened, the echoes never stop. So here is the question that remains, the one we cannot shake. Are these echoes simply accidents of physics? Or are they voices, silent witnesses to history, still trying to be heard? When the wind moans like a choir in an abandoned church, is it only the storm? Or are you listening to a congregation that never left? When footsteps follow you in a deserted hallway, Is it only your own echo? Or is someone walking beside you, unseen? When silence itself presses down, filling your head with dread, is it only your imagination? Or is the silence alive, watching, waiting, listening? Perhaps the truth is that it doesn't matter, because once you have stepped into an abandoned place, once you have opened your ears to its sounds, you have already invited them in. The echoes become part of you. They live in your memory, replaying themselves in quiet moments, reminding you that silence is never truly silent. And so, as we close this journey, listen carefully. Right now, in the room around you, in the space behind you. Do you hear it? That faint sound? That almost whisper, just beyond recognition? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's everything. The echoes are waiting, and they are closer than you think.